So 9.2, potential problems with collecting data. So when we are collecting statistics, we have to be careful how we do it because sometimes statistics can be inaccurate. One of the reasons this happens is that there have been problems with how the data is collected. So this is what we're going to go through a few of these potential problems, what it means and how we can stop it within our own data and how we can spot it in other people's data. So the potential problem, use of language and bias. So what this means, it's the way the question is worded that could lead people towards a certain answer. And how to stop it? You don't want to let your opinion show in the wording. An example of this would be, what do you think of that orange President Donald Trump? You know, that type of a thing where you're putting a bias into it, and that's not okay when it comes to surveys, when you want data that is accurate and not biased. Potential problem, privacy. And what this means is that some people may not want to share their personal information. And how to stop it? Maybe you do an anonymous survey or you don't ask a particular question. Things like asking teachers what their phone numbers are for a survey. I wouldn't be comfortable sharing my phone number with you. And so therefore I would not answer it, or I would answer it inaccurately. There's a lot of times where this is the case. If someone wants to know how much money I make in a year, if it's not anonymous, I'm not going to tell them. It's not polite. Oh, also, FYI, there's something that's good to know. Don't ask people how much they make. Generally, they don't like to talk about that. Even if you're doing the same job, it's a little bit of a faux pas.
Yeah, it's one of those things, just don't do it.
So cultural sensitivity. Certain questions don't apply to certain cultures, or they could be offensive. Instead, you could add another question to let you know whether the survey is applicable to that group or not, or you could just change your survey. So an example would be, how do you like to cook your Christmas ham? Who can't answer that survey? Anybody know who doesn't celebrate Christmas?
Well, not even just that.
There's
what
a
if you're a
lot of
vegetarian?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Even if you're not celebrating Christmas.
Or Jewish or Muslim.
Hanukkah.
They eat ham, right? So, and lots of cultures don't celebrate Christmas. So in that case, I don't think it would be offensive, depending on how you asked it. But it certainly wouldn't apply to all cultures or all people. So you could say, maybe start the question off by asking, do you celebrate Christmas? And if the answer is yes, then you could ask, how do you cook your Christmas ham? Although I don't know why you want to know how people cook their Christmas hams, but besides the point. Yeah, you can do things like that to kind of weed out participants for whom this doesn't apply, because otherwise they just might, they would either lie because they don't have an option to tell you the truth, or they would not put anything and kind of just walk away, right? If it's online, they'll probably just click out and you won't know why no one's completing your online survey. Or they might be offended, you know, I don't know, one of the two. So timing. Sometimes when you collect data may influence the results. And so when you are collecting data about something, you want to be careful that it's at the right time. Maybe right now at this time of year when we are in the midst of COVID-19, maybe you don't want to be talking about what kind of spring break or what kind of summer camp you're going to go to right away after school's out. Because I don't think very many of them are going to be running. So the timeliness of it is not going to give you accurate results to what people would normally do over a summer. So in that case, maybe don't ask that question just yet. Or if you do, change it. Summer is coming up. What camp would you normally go to at this time of year? Or do you go to summer camp? even a survey on what are you missing out would be a better, or what do you feel you're missing out on this summer would be a better question than that. Or if you were asking people, what kind of winter tires do you put on your car right now? I know I still have my winter tires on, but that's because we were really lazy about getting them off.
And I actually, since I drove I bought my new car, I don't even have winter tires anymore. I just have really good all seasons. So
Oh, nice.
you could even ask in there, do you use winter tires as a lead up?
Mm-hmm. Although right now may not be the time to ask because it's not the right season. What are you going to get your mom for Christmas? Maybe not the most timely thing right now in June when you're just thinking about summer, and maybe you're thinking about Father's Day, which is coming up.
And you just had Mother's Day.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Actually, I'll admit this at the end of the recording. Actually, yeah, don't want to waste time.
So another potential problem you may have is the cost. Sometimes you've got to consider the cost of collecting data. If you want to collect data from the entire city of Moose Jaw, that's going to probably cost you some money, unless you're planning on doing it all by yourself. Going to every person in the house and asking them individually on your own time, which will take you a lot of time, which brings us to the next one. Sometimes you have to consider how much time it takes to collect the data as well. So these two are really tightly linked because you can have lots of time, but no money. You can have lots of money, but no time. So how you can do this is things like choose an appropriately sized sample would deal with things that if it takes you too much time to collect the data, or if it's going to cost you too much money to get everybody in the city surveyed, a sample would be appropriate. And we'll talk about how to do sampling in the next week. Another thing to keep in mind is with time is how long your survey is. How many of you are likely to complete a half-hour-long survey?
Depends on the survey, I guess, but probably not.
To be honest, if a website says, can you answer 4 questions after you're on this website? I'll usually say yes, because I'll answer 4 questions. Can you answer a 10-minute survey after this? No, I usually dip out on that one because it's not worth my time to answer 10 minutes worth of questions about that survey or about their website. So it depends, right? Like you said, but something as unimportant as someone's website, I don't really feel that passionately about it. I don't really care. That said, when political parties, well, not political parties, I got my name on a calling list for like polling to see who you would vote for and what kind of person you would vote for. And one day I was in an airport of all places waiting for my flight, and I got a call from this political polling station, and they said, we'd like to ask your opinion about some political issues. The survey is going to take about 20 minutes. Do you want to do this? And I was like, heck yes, I'd like to do this. I want them to know what I think about politics. And so they asked me all sorts of really interesting questions about would I vote for an Asian prime minister if he was fit for the job? If he was in the party that I agreed to support. Would I vote for a First Nations prime minister if he were the person running as for leadership in the party that I supported? Would I vote for an African, a prime minister of African descent? Would I vote for a female? Would I vote for a non-binary person? These sorts of things. And I thought it was a really interesting question. And of course it ends off with, well, how do you think your community would they do that? And I actually thought my community might be a little racist and wouldn't. Which was an interesting take. But it was a good 20-minute survey that made me think very profoundly about politics in Canada and who parties choose to represent themselves to get the highest chance that they're going to be elected. I think the NDP took a big flyer on Jagmeet Singh as a non-white man. So it just had some really interesting things. And because of that, I was interested in it. I was passionate about the issues, and I wanted to see where this was going and what types of questions they would ask. And I was really interested in the results of the survey too, which I've never been able to find, but that's okay. But it was cool. And so 4 surveys in which you hit the people who are really interested, those people will take the time to fill out your survey. Generally, people aren't willing to do long surveys though, unless they're forced to by work, which happens to, well, which will happen to you. There have been several surveys that they make teachers do that's been like, oh my goodness, it's been a half an hour. When is this survey done? But I want to have my voice heard. But then they get angry when there's like a low participation rate, and it's like, well, then maybe you should have cut down some of those questions. Okay, ethics. Using survey results for a different reason than you told participants. So you come to class and you have decided that you are going to start selling an ice cream treat of some sort, which is going to be problematic because you don't have a freezer at school, but you're going to start selling ice cream treats at school. And you know this. And you just go around and you ask people, hey, what's your favorite ice cream treat? Just asking for a friend. Or what's your favorite ice cream treat? I may buy some for the class sometime. And then you come and you sell them to them. That's an ethical issue, because you've got this information that they've told you in good faith, hoping that you're going to give them some free ice cream treats, and instead you've used it to try and make money for yourself. And this is an interesting one. So be honest about why you want this information. Businesses ask for phone numbers all the time, and the vast majority of the time, I refuse to give them my phone number because I do not feel like they will be ethical in how they handle that information. And I don't want to be on a calling list.
And sometimes they put it in small print at the very end that if you answer these questions, they may be used for whatever purposes. So they may not outright tell you, but they'll put it in there in small print. So legally they've covered their grounds. So you just have to kind of really pay attention and read carefully before you do anything, because what you think is your information being shared or private, depending on what you've clicked when you agree to terms and service, might be public opinions.
Yeah.
Because they're collecting information.
Yeah, and sometimes they sell them to third parties. Someone has sold my phone number because I got a call from BCAA, which is the British Columbia car automobile, like CAA, but for BC, telling me that it was the last warning and the Federal Bureau of Finances was going to put out a warrant for my arrest. And I was like, we don't even have a Federal Bureau of Finances in Canada. This is beyond bonkers. And why would they be using BCAA to contact me? So someone stole my phone number and sold it to scammers who were trying to use it to fish data out of me. So careful with that. And so that's part of an ethical issue, that someone that I, in good faith, gave my phone number to, probably a business, likely not an individual, but could be even an individual, has sold me information without my permission, because I would never have agreed to that. Unless I did, and it's a place I trust, like, I don't know, like a charitable organization, Compassion Canada has my information. So does the Saskatchewan Drama Association. Heck, Prairie South has my information too, right? So hopefully it's not one of those businesses that I trust. So this question, what's the potential problem and how can we fix it? A survey is conducted to find out if citizens think the local government should provide more money for youth activities. So that's the problem. The question is asked, would you support an increase in taxes to create more skate parks? Does that question even ask what the survey wants to know? The answer is no, it doesn't at all. And also it's kind of making you think, no, I don't want that increase in taxes. That's a terrible idea because nobody wants the taxes to increase. Well, I shouldn't say that, carte blanche. Most people, most of the time, don't want our taxes to increase. That said, I'm very happy to have our taxes increase if it means that we don't have to pay individually for our sewer to be, water lines to be replaced in front of our own properties. Because that's a public good and that should come out of our taxes, you know, that sort of a thing. But if the city councilors just want a raise, I don't want my taxes to go up to subsidize a raise for them. So that's sort of a thing. But and I don't want to pay more taxes to create more skate parks either, because I know that our skate park has an unsavory reputation, shall we say. And so for me, this is a use of language thing, because I do think that the local government should provide more money for youth activities. I think that's important. I think they've done a pretty good job of it. Not all our youth activities are used. So a rephrase would be, would you support the government spending more money on youth activities? It's asking what they want, what the initial survey was really looking to have answered, but it takes away the increase in taxes because that's a bias against it. You're going to get a lot of people saying no, when if you had made your intent more clear, they would probably say, huh, yeah, that's a good idea. And this GOV apostrophe T, this is the short form for the word government. All right, potential problem. How can we fix it? A survey is conducted to find out about the level of school spirit. Students are polled right after the football team wins an important game. And the issue with this one is timing. Everyone is super pumped after a major sports victory. So maybe change when you do the poll to a more neutral time. Maybe you do it after the football season's over, or maybe you have done it before, the week before that big game, or some other time.
Or in the off season, when because if you did it right after the season, if it was a poor season, then people might be disgruntled, and just kind of think about, do it when people are going to be as unbiased in their answer as possible.
Yeah. So potential problem, Kublu and Ernik plan to open a shop in Moose Jaw that would sell traditional Inuit crafts. To ensure Moose Jaw is the best place for their business, they want to survey residents to find out how popular Inuit crafts are. Kublu knows that they would get the most accurate results if each household in Moose Jaw is surveyed, but Ernik points out that this is problematic. Why would it be problematic? Well, because of cost. It is going to cost a lot of money. Unless these two people by themselves spend their own time canvassing everywhere, door to door, they're going to have to pay for someone to help them, right? And even if they use their own time, well, that's time that they can't spend working and making money. So it cost them as well, just more indirectly. So instead of using a population, pick a sample size, a smaller group of people to poll. And we'll talk about that next week. Different types of sample sizes, different types of samples, because there are lots of different types of samples we can use. So Antonia wants to find out if there was a relationship between household income and how much people spend on Christmas presents. So we're going to identify problems and explain how she could fix them. First of all, she wants to know how much that relationship between household income and how much people spend on Christmas presents. That's cultural sensitivity. Not everyone celebrates Christmas, and so not everyone's buying Christmas presents. Maybe replace Christmas with holiday, or maybe ask a pre-question, do you celebrate Christmas? For those of you who are don't understand why I use an X instead of the word Christ in Christmas. This is actually an ancient Christian like shortening, because the X is the first letter in the word Christ. So it's a really old one. If you look back around, I think it emerged around like 300 AD. So I know there's some sects of Christianity that are offended in it because they think that it's crossing out Christ. And then there's some people who are like, I just don't understand. It's just the first letter in Christ. And so that's why it just shortens the word. So there's that. But then there's also this relationship between household income, privacy. People don't like sharing how much money they earn. So you could fix that by making it anonymous and being very careful with how you phrase it, the question. And that would help make things a bit more acceptable there. And so you can see the practice assignment there, page 435, 3, 4, 6, and 8. And I think that's it. And then we go into data collection and using samples. Yeah. I'm wondering if we should just go into this week.
Is this the last section?
No, then I've got one more, so we're 1 week off. So I was going to do 2 sections next week, but maybe we'll do 2 this week. Yeah, I think I will. Real quick. Just because we talked about samples and what they mean. So we're going to talk really quickly here using samples and populations to collect data. So a population is when you are asking everybody, the whole group, about which you are getting information. You can get info about population either by a census, which is everybody in the population, or from a sample, which is collected from a small portion of the population. So an example of a census is every 5 years, Statistics Canada conducts a census where they ask every Canadian in the entire country a series of questions about who lives in their home. It's every 5 years. It provides amazing data for businesses wanting to invest in a population in Canada. Also, it gives great information for communities to figure out what kind of infrastructure they need to be focusing on over the next 5 years. So if they notice that suddenly older population are super old and they're getting into their senior years, they need to be focusing on senior healthcare issues, maybe making sure they have enough group home, or like not group homes, hospice care, that sort of a thing. Making sure that they have senior community programs that they can do, maybe some more square dancing or whatever. I don't know. I'm not a senior. Square dancing be fun though. I think I'd like that.
I have never heard of it.
Oh, it's well, look it up, Google it. It's kind of funny and fun. So they used to have square dancing every sidewalk days. There'd be tons and tons of square dancing. I don't know if that still happens though.
I used to take it. I took it in phys ed class in high school.
Oh, yeah.
Or elementary school. Sorry, my teacher used to I used to take it as a unit.
Yeah, well, because it's so good for your heart. Like there's so much cardiovascular work that you do in square dancing. At any rate, regardless, if you find out that you're from the census that all of a sudden there's like 1 million people have had babies in your community, suddenly you know that you're going to need some more like public health nurses to help with vaccinations as they grow up. You're going to have to be prepared to maybe hire some more teachers to deal with this influx of population that's coming into the school system. You know, you're going to have to fund your library well, because that's where a lot of young moms bring babies when no one else is there to support them or provide free services, right? And so these things are, oh, and FYI, Ms. Chow, the library has really great stuff for like newborn babies and stuff.
Yes, I cannot wait for it to open up.
Yeah, super great. At any rate, so that's what a census does and why it's useful. However, the cost is extraordinary. For a census to be viable, the Canadian government has said that you need 80% of all households in a community to answer that survey. That's a big number. That's a very big number. And so not everyone does it right away, and they have to hire people called enumerators to go around, and they get the address of everyone whose form hasn't gotten back to the government, and they have to ask people this information at the door to help them fill out the form or help facilitate this process. I worked as an enumerator one summer, and it was enlightening, let me tell you. So there were some people that were very upset and offended that the Canadian government would be asking questions about them. There were some people who were just like, I didn't know how to do it. And there were some people that were like, census? What's a census? They just thought it was junk mail and they threw it away. Keeping in mind that if you don't fill your census form out, it can be a $500 fine. So don't just throw it away. You should fill it out.
Oh God.
But keep in mind, like I was living in Regina at the time, and I was one of like 20 enumerators that were hired for a 2-month span to try and bring Regina's enumeration up to 80%. And so we were given smaller pockets of neighborhoods. I got like a cathedral area because that's where I lived at the time. And then I got another area across Louvain by Luther College High School in that area by the RCMP barracks. And so I was hired, I probably did 120 hours worth of work for the Canadian government, going door to door, knocking on people's doors and figuring out where their census surveys were. And what'd they pay me? It was above minimum. It's like $2 above minimum wage, whatever that was at the time. So that you have to weigh into the cost of the census. It costs money because it's not only sending out these things to every household in Canada, it's then also making sure you get them back in. So censuses are extremely expensive. And so Canada doesn't do it very often, once every 5 years.
And I don't think the last one, I've always wondered when they're going to do an online option for it. And I don't think I think the last one there was.
There was, yeah.
You could do, you could fill in the information so that way you didn't have to mail your form back in.
Yeah.
You still had to go on to some website and fill in all of their questions.
Yeah. Yeah. It was really nice because it streamlined the process quite quickly. Like I was so excited to get it. Every year I hope that I get the long form. I've never gotten the long form. I only get the short form. And so I fill in my 5 questions and press submit, and that's it. But I think 1/4 of all households in Canada get what's known as a long form census. And this has like, it's about a half hour to fill out. It's like 30 questions. So as an enumerator, we were told to kind of maybe avoid the long form answers. If those people haven't got them in, just target the short form ones. Let's get that in.
Be quicker.
Yeah, yeah, because it's not such a big deal. I remember knocking on the door, and the lady from Corner Gas, the older woman, answered the door. She wasn't wearing pants. It was really awkward. It was really funny.
You'd think someone would put on pants if you're at least going to come and answer the door. Maybe just don't answer it, right?
Oh, it's really funny. At any rate, there you have it. So instead of doing a census, you can do it from a portion or use a sample. And this is what the vast majority of surveys or experiments do. So, for example, testing 3 random batteries every hour on a production line. So you have a production line, it's making batteries, and every hour you just pull 3 random ones out of the production line and you test it to see if they've got the correct amount of charge and they're ready to go to market. And that's a sample. You're not testing every battery, because if you tested every battery on the production line, you would have no batteries to sell. So that's super impractical. So census, pros, extremely accurate. Cons, very expensive, very time consuming. And if you do this with every product, you'll have none left to sell. Samples, cheaper, less time, and if done properly, the data is still valid and accurate. Cons, it is less accurate than a census. And if it's not done correctly, then the data is not valid and it can be complicated. And so you'll see that in the next section. We'll talk about how it can be complicated. So here's another practice question you can attempt, page 440, number 4. So why use a census instead of a sample? Well, to determine the average number of siblings in his class, of his classmates, Carlos surveyed each person in the class. So, oh, this was the one where we had a meow day. Oh, that's funny. Because the population is small, he could do a census. It won't take much time or money because it's just his class. We don't know how many classmates Carlos has, but it's probably less than 40, which means it's doable for him to do that, for everybody in the class. Every 5 years, Statistics Canada conducts a sentence. One question in the survey is used to determine the ages of people in the household. Because accurate info is needed, that's why they do a census. For government infrastructure, we talked about that already. Schools, daycares, elderly care homes, highways, plumbing, electrical wiring. Maybe it's, because we need people to be prepared to deal with a building boom if that's going to happen. So the SRC is planning a Spirit Day. To encourage grade 9s to participate in the day, the SRC set up in the hallway to collect data about what types of Spirit Days grade 9s like. By the end of the day, they had surveyed 73% of the grade 9 class. So do you think the data was collected from a sample? Why do you think the data was collected from a sample instead of an entire population? Well, in this case, it's faster and it's more convenient. They don't have to chase down everybody. Will the opinions of the sample likely reflect those of the population? Explain. Well, and here's the thing. It kind of depends on the size of the population. If you've got like less than 20 grade 9s and you only survey 73% of them, the data may or may not be valid because you're taking a small portion, or you're taking a portion of a small population, whereas a census might be more appropriate. If the population, if you have over 100 grade 9s and you take 73%, then it probably will be valid, right? Because you've gotten a lot more. So, was a sample or a census used in this question? Saskatchewan considers banning all cell phones from all of its schools. To determine the opinion of students on this issue, you poll each student in your school. So, this is a population. The population here is all students in the province. So, because only one school was polled, this particular question is talking about a sample. It's not valid of every school in the entire province because only one school was sampled, not a portion of every school. And so you just have that one school. So, you know, it could be a very, what if your school was a K-4 elementary and you said all cell phones will be banned. Well, none of those kids probably have cell phones, so they won't care. And it's not
parents would be happy.
The parents would be very happy. Yeah. So it's not going to reflect the reality for a grade 9 to 12 school. So you have to be careful of that. To determine which politician is expected to win the municipal election, municipal means city. So to determine which politician is expected to win the city election, a municipal election, every person over 18 and who is eligible to vote is polled. So the population is every person over 18 and who is eligible to vote. And they have asked everybody. So that is a census. And that is kind of silly. Why would you do a poll for that? It'd be very expensive and that's not a good idea. They should have done a sample for this because it would be too expensive and too time consuming. And you'll figure out the census of it on the day when people vote. So to determine the average lifetime for a type of light bulb, 150 light bulbs were selected randomly from a production line and tested. So the population is all light bulbs on the production line, right? The average lifetime for a type of light bulb. We're looking at all the light bulbs. So it is a sample because they've only taken 150 bulbs. I think it's valid because the sample size is big and it's selected randomly. So here are some questions that you can practice on. Page 440, 3, 6, 7, and 8. And that is it. And then we'll go into what types of samples there are. So that's a big one for today. Sorry about that. But we got 2 sections done and I'm kind of pleased. I'm going to stop the recording and then you can ask some questions.